Welcome back, guys. In today's episode, I'm sharing 10 true, terrifying stories about road trips through Kentucky. These stories will make you think twice before ever taking scenic routes at night. But before we begin, please consider subscribing, and don't forget to like and share it with your friends. Let me know where you're watching from. Thank you all. Now let's start. I was 22 when it happened. We were deep into a road trip, Atlanta to Chicago, with no real schedule and even less of a plan. Just me, my cousin Nash, and our friend Hugo, crammed into Nash's old Ford Ranger with a cooler full of gas station snacks and a playlist we kept arguing about. We decided we were going to avoid the interstates entirely. That was the whole idea. Take the back roads, eat in diners that didn't have websites, sleep in motels with plastic room keys and ice machines that barely worked. We wanted to see the places nobody talks about, the weird ones. We'd been driving since around 8 that morning. Somewhere north of Lexington, Nash saw a faded green road sign for a place called Wells Run, 12 miles off route. He said we should stop there for dinner. Maybe find a local bar with some live music, maybe something strange. He liked detours, especially the kind you couldn't find on a map. He was behind the wheel, so Hugo and I didn't argue. As soon as we took the turn off, the road changed. It narrowed fast. 2 lanes that looked like they hadn't seen maintenance in decades. Grass creeping through cracks, pavement crumbling at the edges. The lines were almost completely worn away. There were signs, but they didn't make sense anymore. Bent metal with half-missing letters, warnings for things that probably didn't exist. Trees got thicker too, leaning in close like the road had been cut out of them instead of planned. We dipped into a ridge and started hugging curves without guardrails. Every few seconds, I looked out my window and saw nothing but a steep drop and trees that went down forever. We passed a rusted pickup balanced on concrete blocks and an old bait shop that looked like it had been swallowed by vines. The paint had peeled off in big strips, and the letters on the sign were all out of order. Nash made a joke about deliverance. I laughed, but mostly because I didn't want to be the only one not laughing. After that, the silence felt heavier. That's when the GPS froze. Nash tapped the screen a few times, but it was stuck. We were still moving, but the little blue dot wasn't. Just sitting there, like we parked in the middle of nowhere, no bars, no service. The compass spun once and gave up. Nash said, "Screw it," and dropped the phone in the cup holder. We figured we'd hit a dead zone happens on back roads. No big deal. But then, maybe 10 minutes later, we passed a crumpled guardrail and a speed limit sign that looked like it had been shoved sideways by a snowplow. The sign had graffiti on it, a row of uneven teeth, and the word grin in dripping black paint. 5 minutes after that, we passed it again. Same spot, same guardrail, same weird mouth drawn across the sign. I leaned forward and said, "Did we turn around at some point?" Nash shook his head. He hadn't touched the wheel. It was a straight shot, no forks, no choices. Just one long road, and somehow we were back where we'd been. The third time we passed it, I pulled out my phone and took a picture. Same damage on the guardrail. Same crude spray paint. Same little chunk missing from the bottom of the sign. That was the 3rd time. Then came a 4th. That's when Hugo woke up in the back seat. He stretched, looked out the window, and blinked a few times. "Didn't we already pass that thing?" he said. We told him. He thought we were screwing with him, trying to mess with his head. But then he saw the sign again. His face changed. He leaned forward and stared out the windshield like maybe the road was going to start making sense if he just focused hard enough. Nobody said much after that. Nash slowed down. A few minutes later, we pulled off into this little dirt turnout that might have been a trailhead once, way back when. There was an old wooden bench missing a leg, a trash can with no bottom, and something green and vine-covered that looked like it used to be a vending machine. We all got out, not saying why. Just needed to stretch, breathe, stand still for a second. That's when I noticed it. Another road smaller than the one we'd been on, almost hidden behind the trees. It dipped hard, steep, and narrow, barely wider than the truck. No lights, no signs facing us. Just a rusted chain-link fence next to it, with a red warning sign on the other side. Nash walked over and turned it around. It said, "No outlet. Do not enter after dark." We all stood there for a second, staring at the sign like maybe it would change. Sky was already dark. I told them we should turn around, head back the way we came. Even if we had to see that sign a fifth time, at least we knew the road. But Hugo shook his head. If we're stuck in a loop, he said, then it won't matter. He figured the dirt path might cut through, connect to something else, maybe even back to the highway. I didn't like the idea at all, but Nash was already in the truck again, so I climbed in too. We started down the dirt path, and right away it was worse than expected. Deep potholes, sharp turns, low branches that dragged across the roof loud enough to make my jaw clench. At one point we had to go around a fallen log, and the whole truck tilted like it was going to roll. No signs. No turnoffs. Just more trees and more dirt. Then, all at once, the trees opened up. We dipped into a hollow. It was a perfect bowl, steep walls all around, and right at the center was a building, made of wood and stone, old with dark windows and no lights. No driveway, no mailbox, no path, just a dirt ring around it like people used to drive through and stop bothering. It looked dead, but there was someone outside. A man, or something that looked like a man, wearing a long coat, standing perfectly still, facing us. Not moving, not doing anything. Hugo leaned forward and said, maybe he knows how to get out. I told him no, don't open the window. Nash rolled it down anyway, halfway. Hey, he shouted, you all right? We're looking for Route 65. No answer. The figure didn't move, didn't even flinch. Then Nash flicked on the high beams. The light hit the figure full on, and that's when I knew something was wrong. The face. It wasn't a face. It was flat. Painted. Not like someone wearing a mask, but like the mask was the head. Eyes were just black smears. The mouth was a two-red line. It didn't blink, didn't open, but the head tilted, like it was listening to something far away. Then it stepped forward. Slow. Then another step. No sound. No shuffle. Just movement. I told Nash to back up. Now? He didn't ask questions. He hit reverse, spun the wheel. The figure stopped. Then suddenly, it was closer. No movement, just less space. Like someone skipped the frame. I shouted. Nash floored it. We tore back up the hill. I looked back once, only once, and saw it standing at the top of the clearing, head still tilted. We hit pavement again with a jolt that knocked the mirror sideways. But now the place we pulled off before, it wasn't there. No bench, no vending machine, no sign, just trees. And the road split. 3 ways, no signs, no clues. All of them looked the same. Hugo asked if we'd driven into a test range or something. He was starting to breathe hard like he'd just run a mile. Nash didn't say anything, just picked the middle road. It dropped fast, then rose again. And then somehow we were back on a highway. Real lines, real pavement. A semi passed us on the left and everything suddenly felt like it had weight again. We didn't talk for a while. At the next gas station, we pulled off and got out. There were 3 long scratches on the side of the truck. Deep, straight through the paint. Something pale was caught in the back door. I reached for it, thinking it was fabric. But when I touched it, I froze. It wasn't cloth. It was paper. Old, brittle, like the kind you'd peel off a bathroom wall in an abandoned house. There was something drawn on it. 3 black circles and a single red line. Eyes and a mouth. I dropped it right there in the lot. Told Nash not to touch it. We didn't talk much after that. 3 weeks later, Hugo sent me a link to some local blog. Somebody talking about a trail outside Wells Run. Said it had been blocked off since the 80s. Mentioned an old ranger station that never got torn down. Claimed they saw someone standing outside. The photo was blurry, but the building was the same. And there weren't just one figure. There were 3, 2 in coats like the one we saw. The third one was taller. Three of us, me, Eli, Joe, and Danny, had packed into my old Honda Civic for a weekend road trip. We were heading from southern Tennessee up to Columbus, Ohio. The plan was to leave late Thursday night, drive straight through, and get there by Friday morning. It sounded like a good idea at the time. No motel costs, less traffic, and more time to hang out when we got there. We were all in college, broke, and overconfident in our ability to survive on vending machine snacks and energy drinks. The first couple hours were fine. We were full of dumb road trip energy, talking loud, arguing over the playlist, and passing around a giant bag of cheesy popcorn that made the whole car smell like a high school locker room. We stuck to the interstate at first, making decent time through Nashville and into Kentucky. Somewhere just south of Louisville, we hit construction. Not just a few cones, a full-blown traffic nightmare. Nothing was moving. So I pulled off the next exit, hoping to find a detour that didn't involve watching brake lights for 3 hours. Eli pulled up Google Maps and found a back highway that cut northeast through a bunch of little towns. It looked quiet and easy, and honestly, the idea of cruising a country road at night sounded kinda nice. At first, it was. 2-lane road, barely any cars, mostly farmland and woods. The moon was out, casting just enough light to see the outlines of fields and the occasional farmhouse with a porch light on. We were still chatting, still passing snacks around, still laughing. No one thought twice about it. But by midnight, something felt off. We'd been driving for over an hour on that road, and it started to feel like it wasn't taking us anywhere. The signs weren't adding up. We'd pass one that said, Hollis, 5 miles, and then 20 minutes later, there'd be another one saying, Hollis, 4 miles. We thought maybe it was just slow progress, but the car was moving fine. I wasn't creeping. I checked the speedometer more than once just to be sure. The towns never came, just more woods, more nothing. That's when the radio started glitching. At first, it was small static crackling between songs, a few hiccups. Then songs would restart like someone hit rewind. One got stuck in this weird 30-second loop, playing the same verse over and over. Then it suddenly jumped forward mid-chorus and kept going like nothing happened. Joe joked that we were in Appalachian Twilight Zone territory, but the laughs got quieter after that. None of us wanted to say it, but something about the road felt wrong. Around 1 in the morning, we saw lights. A diner sat just off the highway, an old chrome and glass building with a neon EAT sign that flickered between red and white. It looked like a throwback from the 50s, tucked into a gravel lot surrounded by tall trees. It should have felt like a blessing. We were tired, hungry, and starting to get nervous. So we pulled in. There were 5 or 6 cars parked outside, but they looked like museum pieces. Dusty, faded. One had moss growing under the windshield wipers. Another had leaves caked into the edges of its windows. They didn't look abandoned. They looked like they'd been trapped there. Inside, it got weirder. The place was fully lit. Booths were clean. Menus were laid out neatly at every table. The fans on the ceiling turned slowly. There were coffee cups half full at the counter, just sitting there like someone had taken a sip and left them. But there wasn't a single person inside. No cook, no server, no customers. No sound except the faint hum of the lights and the creak of the fan overhead. Eli pointed at the clock above the register. 3 o'clock exactly. Not a second passed. The hands weren't moving. The second hand was stuck pointing up, and no matter how long we stood there watching it, it didn't tick once. We didn't talk about it. We just walked back to the car. Nobody said a word until we were halfway down the highway again, and even then, it was just Joe whispering, "What the hell was that?" The farther we drove, the stranger things got. We passed a billboard for Old Glory Tobacco around 1:30. It was falling apart. Faded paint, rust creeping across the bottom, and someone had spray painted "Turn BACEC" in red across one corner. We joked about it, tried to brush it off. Then we saw the same billboard again 10 minutes later. Not a similar one, the same one. Same rust, same torn corner, same exact graffiti. It was like the road looped back without turning. Then came the barn. First time we passed it, the roof was caved in and the siding looked like it had been clawed by something huge. 20 minutes later, same barn, same hole in the roof, same bent weather vane spinning lazily. The third time we saw it, none of us made a sound. It didn't feel like déjà vu anymore. It felt like we were trapped in something that didn't want us to leave. We finally pulled over at a crossroads, hoping to figure things out. The signs pointed to towns like Merrill Ridge, Kilton, and West Dara, places we'd never heard of. We checked the paper map in our phones. Nothing matched. The GPS couldn't even find us anymore. Just a blue dot floating in a sea of gray. While we were arguing over whether to turn left or go back the way we came, something moved across the far edge of the road. It looked like a person at first, tall and thin, but there was something wrong with how it stood, too upright, too still. Its clothes were shredded, hanging like wet strips of fabric. Its head tilted sideways, way too far, like its neck had buckled. I don't even remember deciding to do it. I just reached for the headlights and flipped them on. The figure disappeared instantly. No sound, no movement. It was just gone, like it had never been there. I hit the gas without waiting for anyone to speak. After that, time got strange. The dashboard clock said only 10 minutes had passed, but we'd listened to what felt like most of the CD, at least 8 songs. When we checked, the track counter said we were still on song 2. Our phones matched the car clock. We'd lived an hour and 10 minutes. Eventually, maybe around 5 or 6 in the morning, hard to say, we hit a town that looked real. Gas station lights, actual people, trucks parked at the pumps. One guy leaned against the door, smoking, and nodded at us like nothing was weird. The moment we pulled in, everything felt normal again. No looping signs, no creepy buildings, just pavement and birds and the smell of diesel. We filled up without saying much. When I asked the clerk how far we were from Lexington, he raised an eyebrow and said, 15 minutes. Straight shot. We'd been driving for 5 hours. 5 hours for what should have been 60 or 70 miles. None of us could explain it. The rest of the trip, we stayed on the interstate. No matter how bad the traffic got, we stuck with it. Not one of us even suggested a shortcut. I haven't touched Kentucky back roads since, and I never ever drive at night without a full tank. I was 20 when 4 of us were driving from Cleveland down to Nashville, hoping to shave a couple hours off the trip by taking some back roads through Kentucky. We figured we'd just drive through the night, no hotel, no stopping unless we absolutely had to. Gas, snacks, coffee. Rotate drivers when someone started yawning too much. Keep it simple. Get there before sunrise. That was the plan. The first few hours were uneventful. By the time we crossed into Kentucky, the highway was mostly empty. Just a few 18-wheelers humming along in the distance, their taillights fading out behind us. We turned off somewhere near a town called Reading Hollow, a place so small I'm not even sure it had more than a post office and a diner. The GPS had us on this winding 2-lane road that cut through rolling hills and thick woods. It looked like the kind of road where you'd expect to see deer and maybe an old barn or two, but there was nothing. No houses, no lights, no billboards or gas stations or signs of life. Just trees pressing in from both sides and the occasional wooden fence that looked like it might collapse if the wind picked up. I was riding shotgun. Marcus was driving. In the back, Jonah and Liv had both passed out with their sweatshirts pulled over their faces. I think Jonah had earbuds in. Not sure about Liv, she just curled up, legs tucked, like she'd done this 100 times. The only sound was the tires on the road, a low, steady hum, and the occasional clatter from the trunk whenever we hit a bump too fast. We'd been on that stretch maybe 20 minutes when I saw him. Just a guy standing by the edge of the road. Not on the shoulder, but a few feet back, right by a sagging wooden fence, just past the ditch. He wasn't waving, wasn't looking at us. He was facing the opposite field, arms hanging loose at his sides like he'd just wandered out there and forgot what he was doing. The first thing I noticed was his clothes. This loose, collarless shirt tucked into dark suspenders and brown shoes that looked soaked through with mud. The kind of outfit you'd expect to see in an old black and white photo. He didn't move as we passed, didn't blink, didn't even flinch at the headlights. Marcus kept driving like he hadn't seen him at all. I glanced at him, waited for some reaction, nothing. I didn't say anything at first. I didn't want to sound dramatic, and honestly, I thought maybe it was just my eyes playing tricks. A guy out there in the middle of nowhere at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday? Sure, weird, but not impossible. And we were tired. The night makes everything a little strange if you let it. 2 hours later, we stopped for gas at this rundown station that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 70s. Faded sign, buzzing lights, only one working pump. The kind of place you only stop at if your gas light comes on, and there's literally nothing else for miles. Marcus stayed outside to fill the tank. I went in to grab some drinks and something salty to keep us awake. There was a dusty old display of magazines, one working vending machine, and a cashier who barely looked up when I paid. When I got back outside, I leaned against the car and told Marcus about the guy I'd seen. Didn't even finish describing him before Marcus cut me off and rattled off the same details: shirt, suspenders, old shoes, standing by the fence with his arms down like he was waiting for something. Then he said something that gave me actual chills. He told me he'd seen that guy before. Not recently, like a year ago, on a totally different drive through Kentucky, somewhere else on one of these same kinds of roads. He said he'd always chalked it up to being tired, maybe even a hallucination, but now he was staring at me like he wanted me to tell him it was just a coincidence. Only I couldn't, because I'd never driven through this part of the state before. I didn't even know the name of the road we were on. How could we both see the same exact guy if there wasn't something more to it? We didn't really know what to say after that. Just got back in the car and kept moving. Around 3 in the morning, we pulled into a rest stop, small place, not much to it. There was a vending area, a couple of bathrooms, and a long row of empty parking spaces lit by a single flickering light over the building. Liv and Jonah were still asleep. I stepped out to use the bathroom. Marcus stayed in the car, scrolling through his phone with one hand still on the wheel. The bathroom door was heavy and creaked like a haunted house. Inside, it smelled like bleach and mildew, and one of the fluorescent lights was buzzing overhead. I finished quickly, washed my hands, and stepped back outside into the cold air. And that's when I saw him again. He was standing at the far end of the parking lot just before the trees began. Same suspenders, same worn shoes, same unnerving stillness, like he'd been standing there the whole time and none of us noticed. He wasn't moving toward me, wasn't moving at all, but his head was tilted slightly, like he was waiting, or listening. It wasn't fear exactly, more like that raw jolt you feel when something doesn't line up with reality. I didn't say anything, didn't yell, just walked back to the car as calmly as I could and shut the door hard. Marcus started the engine without a word. We didn't look back, didn't speak for a long time, just drove. The car felt tense. Not like something was in it, just like all of us were holding our breath, even if the others didn't know why yet. Eventually, Jonah stirred and asked why it felt like we were going 10 over and nobody was talking. I told him I was just tired. Marcus said nothing, but his knuckles were white on the steering wheel. We were almost through the last of the back roads when Marcus suddenly hit the brakes, hard enough to make the tires screech. He said someone had just crossed the road. I leaned forward, trying to spot movement, and I saw him again. Just a glimpse, stepping off the shoulder and disappearing into the trees like he knew the exact second to vanish. Same clothes, same build, same strange stillness even in motion. It didn't feel like a guy trying to flag us down or scare us. It felt like he was waiting for us, tracking us. And not in a dreamlike way. In a very literal, I'm seeing you again on purpose kind of way. Marcus didn't slow down again until we hit signs for the main highway. By the time the sun started coming up, we were starving. Pulled into a small diner just off the road near a town called Briar Ridge. One of those places with mismatched chairs and handwritten signs in the window. There were 2 old guys sitting by the window, sipping coffee and barely acknowledging us. We ordered pancakes and bacon. Marcus sat across from me, staring out the window, still gripping his fork like a weapon. I said I was going to the bathroom, more out of routine than anything else. The hallway back there was narrow, painted this weird pale yellow that made everything feel older than it was. The bathroom door creaked even louder than the one at the rest stop. As soon as I stepped in, I caught movement in the mirror. For half a second, I saw him behind me, clear as day. Suspenders, loose shirt, those awful, caked-up shoes. He wasn't reflected like a blur or a trick of the light. He was standing there. When I turned around, the doorway was empty, no sound. No sign of anyone having been there. I just stood there for a second, staring at nothing. Then I washed my hands and walked back like it didn't happen. We ate quickly, paid in cash, and left. Nobody asked why. The sky was blue now. Traffic was normal. The road looked like it always does when the sun comes up. But I kept glancing at the fences, the ditches, the edges of fields. I half expected to see him again, just standing there. Still watching, still waiting. We made it to Nashville a little before noon. Nothing else happened. But ever since that trip, anytime I drive through Kentucky after dark, I feel like I'm being watched. Not in a paranoid way, just in a quiet, persistent sense like someone's keeping track. And every so often, I'll look at the side of the road, expecting to see a man in suspenders just standing still in the dark, far enough back to never be caught. I'd been drifting through Kentucky back roads for almost a week. No real plan. Just me, my beat-up old sedan, and a playlist that had started to feel more like background noise than actual music. A few days earlier, I'd walked out of my job. Middle of a meeting, my manager told me, again, that I needed to smile more, and something in me just snapped. I closed my laptop, stood up, walked out the door, and never went back. Didn't pack much. Couple bags of clothes, a toothbrush, some snacks, and the charger I always forget until the last second. I just started driving east, didn't tell anyone. Didn't really care where I ended up. That day I'd been on the road since early morning, maybe 6 hours into it, mostly passing long, empty fields and barns that looked like they hadn't held animals in decades. Not many towns, not many cars. There was a point where I didn't see another vehicle for what felt like half an hour, which was weird even for back roads. Around late afternoon, I pulled off to get gas. Place was just outside this tiny town called Danwin, one of those names that sounds vaguely familiar until you realize you've never actually seen it on a map. The gas station looked like it hadn't been updated since the 80s. One pump, sun-bleached signs in the windows, and a flickering open light that was half burned out. I got out and started checking the tires while it filled. That's when I saw him. He came around the corner from the side of the building, like he'd been standing there just out of sight. Mid-30s maybe, hard to tell. He looked worn, not dirty, just used up. He wore a thin windbreaker over a stretched-out green sweater, jeans that didn't quite reach his ankles, and soaked white sneakers that squished when he walked. He asked if I was heading east. His voice was low, clear, and not nervous, but there was something in the way he asked, like it mattered a lot how I answered. I kind of froze for a second, didn't know what to say. Then he said he had $40 and needed a ride to a place called Mercer's Hollow. Said it was maybe 30 miles away, past a quarry. I'd never heard of it, didn't sound like a real town. When I asked what was there, he didn't explain, just kept staring at the road like he was trying to remember it from a dream. He didn't look dangerous. Didn't look like much of anything, honestly. I said sure, and he climbed in. We pulled back onto Route 14, and for the first 20 minutes, it was almost relaxing. No chatter, no music, just the road and the hum of the tires. I thought maybe he was asleep, but then I glanced over and saw his eyes wide open, focused out the window, watching the trees. That's when I started noticing that the road didn't seem right. The turns were sharper than I remembered from earlier. Trees looked closer too. Branches hung low enough to brush the sides of the car now and then. I kept checking the mile markers. They were out of order. Mile 38. Then mile 32, then back up to 41. I checked my phone. Still had service, but GPS was slow, almost lagging behind. I asked if he was sure we were going the right way. He said, "It always starts like this." Just that. Didn't look at me. Didn't elaborate. I asked what he meant. Nothing. Eyes still locked on the tree line like he expected something to step out. Static started bleeding into the speakers, even though the radio was off. Then it cut in fully when I tried turning it on. Just white noise. No stations, no voices, just static. About 5 minutes later, we passed a billboard, huge. Empty background, just a washed-out gray sky and a staircase, snapped in half like it had collapsed midair. No text, no company name, nothing. When we passed it, I saw him twitch. Not jump, just a tiny flinch, like he'd seen something he didn't want to see again. I slowed down. He turned to me and said, "Don't stop. Just keep driving." His voice wasn't urgent. It wasn't afraid. It sounded tired, like he'd had to say that before and knew it wouldn't matter. We kept driving. The road narrowed. No lane markers anymore, no signs, just gravel crunching under the tires. Then, without warning, he told me to pull over. There was a break in the trees on the right side, a narrow gravel path, almost hidden. The rusted gate at the front was hanging off its hinges. And there was no sign, no mailbox, just that path vanishing into the woods. He got out without another word, stood on the shoulder, looking into the trees. I rolled down the window and asked, "This Mercer's Hollow?" Still no answer. He just said, "You need to leave now, don't look back." That's when I started to feel cold. Not just temperature-wise. Something about the way he said it made me feel like I already had. Like I'd done something I couldn't undo. I asked if he was okay. He didn't respond, just kept staring into the trees. Then softer, Almost like he was talking to himself, he said, "You won't find it on any map. You only get there if you're already gone." Something about the way he said that made my stomach drop. I should have left. I should have thrown the car in reverse and backed all the way down the highway. But I didn't. I sat there, I don't know how long. And then I saw someone, or something, step out from behind a tree. Same height as him, same clothes. But it moved wrong. Like it didn't know how walking worked, just mimicked the shape. It didn't get closer, it just stood there, like it had been waiting to be noticed. Then another one stepped out, and another, each identical. Same windbreaker, same soap sneakers, same dead stare. All of them still, watching. I didn't wait to see what they'd do. I slammed my foot on the gas and peeled off the shoulder so fast I almost fishtailed into the ditch. Didn't care. Didn't care where I was headed. Didn't look in the mirror. I just drove. Fast. Gripping the wheel like it was the only thing keeping me tethered. I stayed on the road until I saw lights, a diner sign glowing through the trees. I pulled into the lot, killed the engine, and just sat there. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Inside, the waitress asked if I was all right. I asked her if she knew Mercer's Hollow. She gave me this look, confused, but something else too. Like she'd heard the name before and didn't like remembering it. Then she said, "That's not around here." I tried describing the quarry, the gravel road, the billboard. She shook her head, said there wasn't anything like that for at least 50 miles. Back at the car, I grabbed my phone. Still no bars. GPS had recorded my last known location as the gas station. Then nothing for 2 hours. No road. No path. Just a gap. Just a gap. Next location was the diner. No route between. No history. Just a blank space like the car had jumped over time. I opened the glove box to find my charger. The $40 he gave me was still there. Only now the bills were damp, soft, almost soggy, like they'd been pulled from a flooded basement, or something worse. I got a motel room just outside Moorhead that night. Single bed, buzzing ceiling light that wouldn't turn off completely. Thin blankets that smelled like they'd been washed too many times without ever actually getting clean. I didn't sleep. Every few minutes I thought I heard something outside the window. Not footsteps, not voices, just this sense that something was out there, standing still, watching. I left before the sun came up. Didn't stop again until I crossed into West Virginia. I stayed on the interstate. No more back roads, no more shortcuts. A few weeks later, I tried searching for Mercer's Hollow. Nothing. Not in any database, not on old maps, not even on the weird conspiracy forums. I even called the state tourism office. The woman on the phone told me, very plainly, that no town by that name had ever existed in that part of Kentucky. I'd borrowed my cousin Leo's clunky old sedan for a week-long solo trip through Tennessee. Just me, an outdated paper map, and way too much overthinking. I didn't really have a destination in mind, just wanted to drive, stay off the interstates, and maybe clear my head long enough to figure out what the hell I was doing with my life. The car, a dull blue '99 Camry with a sagging ceiling and a gas gauge that liked to lie, wasn't exactly glamorous, but it moved when I asked it to. The fan belt screamed every time I started it, and I had to jiggle the key just right or it wouldn't catch, but it ran. That was enough. I plotted my route across the back roads, county highways, winding two-laners that dipped through small towns where people still waved at passing cars. It felt like driving through a postcard. No deadlines, no traffic, just the road and the occasional diner with a flashing open sign buzzing in the window. The first 3 days went about how you'd expect. I stopped in places with names like Maple Hollow and Dry Creek, ate grilled cheese sandwiches off cracked plastic plates, stayed in motels where the curtains didn't close all the way, and the beds creaked if you even breathed near them. The kind of places where the ice machine always seemed broken. It was quiet, peaceful even. I drove with the windows down, the radio cycling through static and old country stations that faded in and out like ghosts. The kind of trip you think about years later and smile. But by the 4th day, something about the silence started to feel less charming. I was way out past Oak Bend, somewhere between Marshall County and, I don't even remember. Just miles of hills and woods and no signs of anything. I hadn't seen another car for at least an hour. No cell service, no roadside stores, not even a busted mailbox to suggest someone had ever lived there. The sun was somewhere past noon, casting that flat, colorless light that makes everything look a little off. My back was killing me from hours in the driver's seat, so when I spotted a small gravel pull-off next to a stand of trees, I figured I'd stop and stretch. The turnout wasn't marked, just a patch of flattened rock and dirt barely wide enough for the car. I shut off the engine and stepped out, the sudden quiet pressing in like a blanket. No birds, no wind, just stillness. I leaned against the hood and stretched until my spine popped. Drank from a bottle of water that had gone warm in the console. I thought maybe I'd walk a few feet into the trees, just to shake off the stiffness. Then I saw someone, a man, walking up the road toward me. At first, I didn't think much of it. People walk. Maybe his car broke down and he was looking for help. Maybe he lived nearby. But as he got closer, I noticed a few things that didn't add up. No car behind him. No backpack, no sign of a bike or anything. Just a man, walking alone in the middle of nowhere. He wore a dingy green polo with the collar half flipped up, dark jeans that were too clean to be working clothes but too dusty to be fresh, and sneakers without laces. His hands swung loosely at his sides. In one of them I saw a bottle beer, I think, and in the other, a knife. Not a little one either. Kitchen-sized. Looked like it came from a drawer, not a tackle box. He was maybe 40 feet away when I saw it, long enough for me to still get in the car but too close for comfort. I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "You all right?" He didn't answer, just kept walking. Then, right as he reached the edge of the pull-off, he lifted the knife slightly and smiled. "You're not who I was waiting for," he said. That line still messes with me. Not "who are you" or "help me" or anything remotely logical, just that. Like I'd interrupted something that was already supposed to be happening, I forced a little laugh, kept my tone light. "Maybe we should pour that into a cup. No sense breaking glass out here." He stared at me for a beat, then nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said, "come on. Let's do that." He gestured toward my car like it was obvious we'd both go there together. I turned and walked toward the driver's side, trying not to rush. I could hear his footsteps behind me, not heavy but close. When I reached the door, I opened it and slid in, left it open just long enough to keep things calm. Then he leaned down, face level with mine through the open window. The knife hovered a few inches from my arm. "Glove box," he said. "You've got cups in there." My stomach flipped. I nodded, pretending to reach. Then I slammed the lock button, twisted the key, and stomped the gas. The car jolted forward, gravel spraying in all directions. He stumbled back, cursing, maybe yelling something, but I didn't hear it clearly. I didn't stop driving. Didn't check the mirrors for a good 5 minutes. Even when I finally did, the road behind me was empty, no sign of him. No car, nothing. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that he'd show up again. Somehow. I drove until the road flattened out and turned to cracked asphalt. Eventually I spotted headlights, an old white pickup heading toward me. Relief hit so hard I almost cried. I flashed my lights and waved my arms, pulling onto the shoulder. The truck slowed, and 2 guys leaned out the windows. One asked, "Everything all right?" Before I could even answer, more headlights appeared behind me. A dusty sedan barreled up and screeched to a stop way too close behind me. It was him. Same shirt, same face, same damn knife in his hand. He shouted something about me taking his stuff, that I had something of his. His voice was hoarse, slurred maybe. I yelled at the guys in the truck, "That's him. That's the guy with the knife." They didn't hesitate. The driver threw the truck into gear and pulled across the road, blocking the guy's car completely. The man hit the brakes hard and skidded sideways. He screamed something unintelligible, then threw his car into reverse and tore off down the road in a spray of gravel and dust. One of the guys in the truck leaned out and said, "Follow us." I nodded, heart still hammering, and stuck close to their bumper. We drove for what felt like forever, but it was maybe 20 minutes before we reached a gas station at the edge of a place called Rose Lake. The station looked like it hadn't been updated since 1985. Flickering yellow lights, half the signs missing letters, a soda machine covered in duct tape. Inside, the cashier handed me the phone. I called the sheriff. My voice was shaking so bad I had to repeat myself twice. 2 deputies arrived after 20 minutes. Big guys, both serious-faced. They took statements from me, the truck drivers, and even the cashier, who just kept chewing gum and nodding like he'd seen worse. When I described the man, the clothes, the knife, the weird line he said, the older deputy got real quiet. He said they'd had reports, a squatter out in those woods. No fixed address, always moving. Sometimes harmless, sometimes not. He'd been seen waving down cars, trying to get rides, asking for food, and sometimes worse. When I asked what worse meant, he looked away for a second. Then he said, "You're lucky you drove off." Not everyone does. I didn't ask anything else after that. They offered to escort me to a motel near the interstate, and I said yes. That night, I barely slept. The room smelled like old bleach and stale coffee. I lay there, fully dressed, clutching my keys, eyes on the door. Every little creak from the hallway made my skin crawl. I waited until the sky outside turned gray before I packed up and left. Didn't even grab breakfast. Just got in the car and started driving. My best friend Lacey and I were finally doing the road trip we talked about since high school. 1 week, just the two of us, no real plan, no responsibilities, just driving wherever the road took us. We didn't have a lot of money, so we made it work the best way we could. We lived off cheap burgers, off-brand energy drinks, and whatever snacks we could grab at gas stations. At night, we'd either crash in the car or look for free campgrounds. We didn't care. We were free, and honestly, sleeping in the back seat with our backpacks for pillows just felt like part of the adventure. The first couple days were great. We went through parts of Ohio and dipped into West Virginia, then down into Kentucky. Every turn felt like a new discovery. Old bridges, forgotten motels, signs for roadside attractions that had clearly been abandoned for years. It was perfect. By the third night, we'd gotten comfortable taking back roads. Highways were boring. We liked weaving through those narrow stretches surrounded by nothing but trees and fences, even if the GPS freaked out now and then. Some of the roads didn't even show up properly on the map app. They were just thin gray lines with no names. But we were explorers, right? That night, we were somewhere deep in Kentucky. I couldn't tell you the name of the town if there even was one. The paved roads were getting rougher, cracked, and patched in places, and the trees on either side had closed in tighter, like the road was shrinking. It was so dark. No street lights, no porch lights, no glow from a nearby town, nothing. Just our headlights cutting through a tunnel of black. The beam reached maybe 20, 30 feet ahead. Beyond that, it was just void. Lacey had fallen asleep about an hour earlier. She was curled up in the passenger seat, wrapped in her flannel blanket, breathing slow and deep. I was tired too, but we weren't far from the next town, or at least I told myself that. I kept sipping on a flat soda and watching the road, trying not to blink too long. I remember adjusting the volume on the music because it was too quiet without her awake, but everything sounded tinny and distant. Then I saw it. Up ahead, maybe a few hundred feet away, a car was pulled off on the shoulder. At first, I thought it was just someone broken down. It happens all the time. But as I got closer, I realized something was off. All 4 of the car's doors were wide open, not just ajar like fully, intentionally open, like someone had yanked them open in a hurry and walked off without closing any. It was an old sedan, pale blue or maybe gray, late 80s by the look of it, kind of beat up. But there were no hazard lights on, no flash of a phone light, no one waving us down. It just sat there, doors open like a dead animal on the side of the road with its limbs splayed. I slowed down a little. Instinct, I guess. You see something like that, part of you wants to make sure someone's okay. But the closer I got, the more something felt off. There was no movement, no sign that anyone was nearby. And the way the doors were open, it didn't feel random. It felt staged, like someone had done it on purpose. I passed it without stopping, didn't even look in the rear view. I just kept my eyes straight ahead and gripped the wheel a little tighter. About 10 minutes later, Lacey stirred. She stretched, blinked at the road, and asked how long we'd been driving. I told her about the car. She kind of laughed it off at first, thought maybe I was tired and spoofed myself. But when she noticed I wasn't laughing with her, she got quiet. Then she said she'd take over for a while. I didn't argue. We switched at a little gravel pull-off next to a row of overgrown bushes. It wasn't exactly scenic, but it was the first spot wide enough to pull over. The air outside was weirdly warm and still. No wind, no bugs, nothing. We swapped seats fast and got back on the road. She started driving and I leaned back trying to get comfortable. But she didn't say anything after we pulled out, didn't put music on, didn't crack a joke like she usually would. I looked over and saw her hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than normal. Then, barely above a whisper, she said, "That car, it's behind us." I sat up fast and twisted in my seat. Sure enough, way back on the road, headlights had appeared. 2 white dots, slowly getting closer. That in itself wouldn't be weird. But something about the way they moved, it wasn't right. The car came into range of our rearview mirror, and as the shape started to form, my stomach just dropped. It was the same car, same pale blue sedan, and its doors were still wide open. All 4, still open, still moving. I couldn't wrap my head around it. How was it even driving? Doors like that should have been flapping in the wind or slamming shut, but they weren't moving at all. They were holding steady, like they were frozen in place. I didn't even realize I'd started saying Lacey's name until she slammed on the gas. The speedometer climbed, 60, 70, 80, but the sedan stayed with us, not gaining, not falling behind, just there, clinging to the exact same distance. We were flying down that road, tires screaming on the curves, and it never let up. We hit a bend in the road, and I shouted to turn if we saw anything. Just something, anything, to shake it. Up ahead, a narrow road branched off to the right. No signs, no markers, just gravel and trees. She turned without warning. The back wheels kicked up a cloud of dust. But the sedan followed, smooth, like it had already known we'd go that way. And then, I saw it clearly through the back window. There was no one behind the wheel. No shadow, no outline. Just an empty driver's seat, nothing. I started shouting, telling her to go faster, yelling nonsense, probably anything to get us out of there. She pushed the car as hard as it would go. 85, maybe more. The tires vibrated against the road like they might come loose. But no matter what, that thing kept its distance. Exactly the same, like it wasn't chasing us, like it was attached to us. And then, all at once, the headlights blinked out. Gone. Just gone. Not faded, not turned, just disappeared. There was nothing behind us, only darkness. Lacey didn't slow down, neither did I. We just sat there, breathing hard, barely blinking, expecting it to show up again around the next corner. But it didn't. The road eventually opened up, and lights appeared in the distance. A small town, real street lights, buildings, signs. We pulled into the first gas station we saw, a bright, ugly thing with flickering lights and sticky floors. But it felt like salvation. She parked right under the brightest light and shut the engine off. We sat there for a long time, didn't speak, didn't move, just stared ahead, waiting to feel normal again. When we finally did say something, it was just to agree trip's over. We weren't going to figure out what that was, and we weren't going to stick around waiting to see if it happened again. The next morning, we drove straight home. Didn't take the scenic route. Didn't stop for lunch. We just drove. We never saw that car again. Sean had just moved to Murfreesboro, and he asked if I could do him a favor, drive his old F-150 down from our hometown in Indiana. His new job had started fast, and he hadn't had time to bring the truck himself. I wasn't working at the time, so I figured, sure, free ride, gas money, a chance to get out of town for a couple days. I've always liked solo road trips anyway. There's something nice about the rhythm of the drive. Just you, the road, and maybe a podcast or some music to keep your brain from folding in on itself. I left just after sunrise on a Tuesday. It was late October, the kind of cold where you need a hoodie in the morning but end up regretting it by noon. I packed light, tossed a cooler in the back seat with a few waters and a sandwich, and hit the highway feeling pretty good about the whole thing. The first few hours were uneventful. Open road, low traffic, steady pace. I rolled the windows down for a while, let the wind blast some of the stale air out of the cab, and made decent time through southern Indiana. Once I crossed into Kentucky, the GPS gave me a few route options. The one it suggested wasn't the usual path down through Louisville and Bowling Green. Instead, it offered this alternate route, some 2-lane state highway that curved through the hills and back roads. It said it'd cut off nearly an hour, and I'd still end up on I-24 near the Tennessee border. I figured, why not? I've taken shortcuts before. They're usually scenic and quiet, and I wasn't in a rush. That turn onto Route 83 was the last normal moment of the drive. It didn't feel wrong at first, just more rural. The road narrowed quickly, and there weren't any guardrails after a few miles, just grassy shoulders and steep ditches on both sides. Trees crowded in, thick and high. The sun barely hit the pavement in some places. Still, nothing unusual. But the further I went, the more the road started to feel forgotten. The pavement cracked and split in long seams, and I had to keep both hands on the wheel just to keep it steady. No other cars passed me. None came the other way. After 20 minutes, I noticed something strange. The GPS had been telling me 30 miles to next turn for a while. Too long. It kept repeating that, 30 miles, every few minutes. But the number didn't go down. I checked my phone. It still showed the same route, same distance. I chalked it up to a glitch, but something about it got under my skin. I looked at the dashboard clock, then again a few minutes later. Time was passing, but not the road. There were no signs, no driveways, not even utility poles. Just forest, shoulderless pavement, and that same creeping sense of saneness stretching out endlessly. Eventually, I saw a gas station. More like stumbled on it. It didn't even have a sign. Just a small concrete building, a single rusty pump out front, and one flickering light under a crooked awning. I pulled in mostly out of habit. The tank wasn't empty yet, but I felt like I needed a reset, some kind of break from the weird loop the drive had become. The pump was old, the kind where you have to lift the lever and listen for that mechanical click before it starts. It worked though. I filled up, then headed inside. The air in the station was stale and smelled faintly like motor oil and canned beans. The shelves were dusty, barely stocked, just random brands of crackers, soup, and motor oil. I grabbed a bottle of water and a snack and made my way to the counter. That's when I saw the guy behind the register. Tall, bony, pale. His eyes were sunk deep into his face, and his cheeks looked hollow, like he hadn't slept in a week. He didn't greet me, didn't smile, just stared like he was watching a slow leak spread across the floor. I set my things on the counter. He scanned them without a word, tapped a few buttons. Then, just before the total came up, he looked straight at me, voice low, like he was barely speaking aloud. "Don't stop for anyone on that road." That was it. No context, no emphasis. He just said it like he was reading the weather forecast. I blinked, unsure if I'd heard him right. I gave a weak chuckle, trying to lighten the mood, but he didn't even flinch. Just handed me my change without another word. I walked out fast, pretending I wasn't freaked out. But back in the truck, his words kept playing over in my head. Don't stop for anyone. About 10 minutes later, that advice became relevant. I noticed headlights behind me, bright, harsh, and way too close. It was like they came out of nowhere. One second I was alone. The next, I was being tailed by some high-beam psycho glued to my bumper. I expected a horn or a flash to pass, but the car just stayed there. No movement. No sound. I tapped the brakes lightly, just a heads up. The lights didn't even flicker. I pulled onto the shoulder to let them pass. As soon as I stopped, their lights cut out. Gone. I checked the mirror, nothing but dark road. Then I looked at the clock. It had jumped forward by an hour. Not a minute. Not 5. A full hour. I had been stopped for maybe 30 seconds. I stared at the numbers, waiting for them to correct. They didn't. The time matched my phone. The engine was still idling. Everything felt normal, but I couldn't explain it. I got back on the road, driving faster now, trying to shake the crawling sensation that had settled into my neck. The road didn't improve. If anything, it felt longer, like each mile stretched into 2. The turns were too sharp, then too gradual. The trees seemed closer than they had before. Then I noticed the mile marker, 42. I saw it once, then again a few minutes later. Same number, same spot. I watched it pass a third time. That was the moment I stopped pretending this was all in my head. Something was wrong, really wrong. I gripped the wheel tighter. That's when I saw him. A man standing just off the white line, facing the woods, arms at his sides, perfectly still. He didn't react as I approached, didn't wave, didn't turn, just stood there like a statue someone forgot to take down. I swerved wide to avoid him. And in the mirror, I saw his head turn slowly until he was facing me. I never saw his face, not clearly, but the way he moved, like he had all the time in the world. I hit a patch of pavement that rattled the whole truck, but when I looked down, the road was smooth. Then came the growl. Low, ragged, animal-like, but not from outside. It was inside the cab, right behind me. I spun around, nothing there, turned the radio on to drown it out, but all I got was white noise. Then, buried under the static, a whisper. Repeating, not words I recognized, just rhythm, insistent. Like a chant aimed right at me. I turned it off. The silence after felt louder than the noise. Then, bang. The whole truck jerked. I looked in the mirror, still nothing in the bed. Then another thud, heavier, like something huge had dropped in. I floored it. Didn't care how fast I was going. Didn't care about speed limits or curves. The pounding continued. Each thud matched the bounce of the tires, like something alive back there was moving with the rhythm of the road. Then it stopped. Everything went quiet. Too quiet. I didn't trust it. And I was right not to. Because a second later, the passenger lock clicked up, sharp and mechanical. I stared at it. The handle twitched twice, like fingers testing the door. I veered off at the next exit, tires squealing as I tore down the ramp. Almost lost control, but managed to keep the truck straight. As soon as I merged onto the new road, the lock snapped down by itself. The mile markers started counting up again, normal numbers, in the right order. The trees thinned out. Streetlights returned. I pulled off at a motel on the outskirts of Nashville. Didn't even check the room before I locked the door and sat on the bed with the keys still in my hand. I dropped the truck off to Sean the next morning, told him it drove fine. Then I bought a plane ticket home and never looked back. We were a week into this meandering summer road trip across Kentucky, not really going anywhere, just following roads and seeing what came up. The kind of trip where there's no itinerary, just cheap motels, gas station snacks, and whatever strange places the map throws at you. My Uncle Russ was driving. He loved this kind of thing. Said the best parts of America were the ones everyone forgot. My cousin Jared was riding in the back with me, and up front was Russ's girlfriend at the time, Sherry. Russ had this rule: no highways. None. He'd go miles out of the way to avoid an on-ramp. Said interstates flattened everything, turned the country into one long exit sign with a McDonald's and a Shell station. He wanted the real stuff, the forgotten stuff. So we were deep into the back roads by then. I mean deep. Twisty state routes, weird county roads that didn't always show up on the GPS. Sometimes we'd go 30 minutes without seeing another car, and we were loving it, or at least Jared and I thought it was funny. Everything felt like an adventure when you're that age. That morning we left a place called Pelham Ferry. The motel there didn't even have a front desk, just this wall with a slot cut into it, and when Russ knocked, a man's hand reached through and handed him a key. No words, no face. Sherry had made some joke about how that was either the creepiest or most efficient check-in she'd ever done. We'd laughed. Looking back, that moment feels like the start of everything going just slightly off. About an hour after leaving town, we stopped for breakfast at this roadside diner. Classic old place with red booths and a jukebox that looked like it hadn't worked since Reagan. While we were eating, Russ got into this long, rambling conversation with the waitress about scenic routes. She mentioned this road near an old quarry that wound down through a region where they used to mine. She called it real different. Didn't explain what that meant, just smiled like it was some kind of inside joke. Russ got that look he always got when he thought he was about to find something no one else knew about. Next thing I know, he's folding the map up like it's some treasure map and steering us in a totally new direction. Sherry raised her eyebrows but didn't argue. That was kind of their dynamic. He wandered. She navigated. An hour later, it felt like we were in a different world. No cars in either direction. Trees crowding the road like they were trying to reclaim it. The asphalt was cracked and uneven. In some places, entire chunks had been swallowed by dirt and grass. The houses we passed didn't look lived in. You'd see a broken porch swing or a mailbox leaning at a crazy angle and wonder when the last time someone checked their mail even was. There was one spot where a rusted-out school bus had slid down into a ravine and just stayed there. We weren't talking much by then. There was this weird quiet in the truck, Not tense, just heavy. Even Sherry had stopped pointing things out. Then she suddenly leaned forward and said, "Wait, what's that sign?" It was just up ahead, sticking out of the tall weeds like someone had planted it there on purpose. Bright green. New looking. Way too clean for the rest of the road. Beller Hollow, 4 miles. Jared frowned. "I've heard of that." Russ glanced at him in the rear view. "Heard of what?" "Beller Hollow," Jared said. "Isn't that the town that collapsed or something?" "Collapsed?" "Yeah. There was this story, maybe just a legend, about a mining town that caved in, like the whole thing went under." Sherry turned around and gave him a look. "That's not real." Jared shrugged. "Still weird the sign looks brand new." That's when we saw them. People. Just ahead, coming around a bend in the road, walking slowly. There were a lot of them, 20, maybe 30, all in a long line, single file, stretched along both shoulders of the road like some sort of parade, only quiet and without any music or talking. Russ slowed the truck way down. I remember thinking he didn't even mean to. It was like his foot had just stopped pressing the gas on its own. The first person we saw was this tall guy in a gray coat holding a long stick that curved at the top. Then a woman in a faded dress that touched the ground. Then some kids, 3 or 4, all dressed exactly alike, like uniforms almost. And then a camel, a full-sized camel, walking right there on the shoulder of a crumbling Kentucky back road. Its hump sagged like a deflated balloon, and its fur was thin and patchy like it hadn't seen food or shelter in months. Behind it came more people, a woman carrying a wrapped bundle, older men with heavy packs, and a few more children. No one was talking, no one even looked at us. They just walked, eyes forward. Steady pace. Russ pulled over to the edge of the road. Sherry said, kind of quietly, "Should we see if they need help?" No one moved. Russ opened the door and stepped out. I followed without really thinking. There was this feeling in my chest, not fear exactly, but something cold and tight, like when you're watching a daredevil stunt and you're just waiting for something to go wrong. The tall man with the stick stopped, but he didn't look at us, didn't move, just stared straight ahead. Then the woman behind him stepped out of line and walked a few feet closer. She said something. It sounded like English maybe, but not right. Stretched out and slow, like she was underwater or someone had messed with the pitch. Sherry called from the truck. "Ask if they need water," Russ asked. "Is there a town down here? What's ahead?" The woman didn't answer. She just raised her hand and pointed further down the road, and that was it. Behind her, the camel let out this noise, a low, grinding groan, not natural. It sounded metallic, like a piece of machinery bending in half. I felt something in my stomach drop. Then the kids, all at once, turned toward us. Same motion, same angle of the head. Their expressions didn't change. They just stared, not angry, not scared, just watching. That's when Russ said, flat and clear, "Back in the truck." We didn't argue. As soon as the doors shut, the windows fogged. Instantly, like something exhaled into the cab from the inside. I wiped the glass with my sleeve and looked out. The road was empty. No people, no camel, no footprints, just cracked pavement and trees. Russ didn't say a word. He yanked the wheel, did a tight U-turn that scraped the shoulder and gunned it back the way we came. The silence in the truck felt louder than anything I've ever heard. 15 minutes later, we rolled past that same diner, the one where we'd eaten breakfast. Only now, it looked completely different. The sign was gone. No cars in the lot. The lights were off. The windows were boarded from the inside like they were trying to keep something in. Russ didn't even slow down. We didn't ask him to. We kept driving until we hit a proper state road. 4 lanes, bright signs, actual traffic. At the next gas station, we stopped. Inside, Russ asked the cashier if he'd ever heard of Beller Hollow. The guy froze for a second. Then he said, "Not in a long time." Russ said, "Was there a town out there?" The guy nodded slow. There was, back in the 70s. Whole place went under, mine collapse. No survivors. He paused, like he wasn't sure whether to say the next part. Then he added, "That road don't go anywhere no more." None of us really talked after that. Not about what we'd seen, not about how it ended. Russ stuck to highways for the rest of the trip. No more detours. No more conversations with waitresses. We never found that road again. Two of my closest friends, Lena and Marcus, convinced me that we didn't need to spend money on a motel. We'd just finished a concert in Nashville and figured, hey, we're young, wide awake, and we've got snacks and a playlist for the drive. The plan was simple: rotate drivers, stay caffeinated, and be back in Ohio by morning. At first, it felt like the perfect end to a good trip. The city lights faded behind us, the roads opened up, and for a while it was all good vibes and highway stretches. We laughed about dumb things, sang along to whatever came on shuffle, and tried to guess how many billboards we passed before the next town. But once we crossed into Kentucky, things started to feel different. It's hard to explain how empty some of those back highways get. You'll be driving for miles and see absolutely nothing. No houses, no cars, not even a distant porch light. Just endless road and black trees pressing in on either side. At first we didn't notice, not really. We were still caught up in the momentum of the night, but after a while, it started to sink in. Every so often, one of us would check the clock. It was always later than we expected. We'd swear only 20 minutes had passed since the last check, but the dashboard would say it had been nearly an hour. At some point, I started to feel like the road was stretching out beneath us, adding distance while we weren't looking. Around midnight, we found this tiny gas station just off the highway. It sat alone, right at the edge of a bend in the road. There was one old pump with a rubber handle that looked like it hadn't been changed out since the 80s, and a flickering overhead light that kept buzzing like a mosquito trapped in a lamp. Marcus stayed in the car scrolling through his phone. I got out to pump. Lena went inside for snacks. She didn't come out right away. When she finally stepped back outside, she looked kind of off. Not panicked, but off. She was holding a soda and a little bag of pretzels, like she wasn't sure why she'd picked them up. Didn't say a word until we were back on the road. Then, in this really quiet voice, she said the guy at the counter hadn't spoken at all, not even a nod. He just stared somewhere behind her shoulder the whole time. Didn't react when she said thank you. Didn't blink. Just rang her up and handed over the change like it was muscle memory. We joked about it at first. Marcus made a joke about ghosts working night shifts. I said something dumb about animatronic cashiers, but none of us opened the snack she bought. About 20 minutes later, I noticed headlights in the rearview mirror. They were way back, barely visible through the dips in the highway, but constant. At first, I figured it was another driver, late-night trucker or something. But as we kept going, I realized something weird. The headlights never got closer. It didn't matter if I slowed down or sped up. They stayed the same distance. Not far enough to vanish, not close enough to pass. I pointed it out. Marcus leaned forward, tried to get a better look. He squinted and shrugged. Maybe they're pacing us, he said. Then Lena, still quiet, said, "It doesn't feel like that." She didn't say what it felt like. She just crossed her arms and stared out the window. When we pulled over to switch drivers about an hour later, those lights were still there. No closer, no farther. Just there. Marcus took over the wheel, and that's when the GPS started losing it. First, it froze. Then it suddenly showed we'd jumped 10 miles forward. Then it started rerouting us to roads we'd never seen, roads that didn't even appear on the physical map Marcus had in the glove box. It told us to take exits that didn't exist, suggested turnarounds in places with no intersections. At one point, it tried to send us onto a narrow gravel path that led straight into a wall of thick trees. The voice kept repeating the same phrase: turn left, turn left, turn left. Flat tone. No urgency, just this emotionless loop. Lena reached over and turned the phone off completely, didn't even hesitate. She just muttered, "It's not helping." That was the last time we used GPS for the rest of the trip, and then the road itself started changing. The pavement looked older, like the lines had been worn away, barely visible in the headlights. The road signs started looking strange too, faded green with names we'd never heard before. Small towns that didn't show up on the map. The letters were slightly crooked, like someone had put them up in a rush and never fixed them. Every mile marker was painted over with black spray paint. But if you looked closely, you could still make out the original numbers underneath, like ghost impressions. Then there were the trees. They were growing closer to the road, pushing in from the sides, branches hanging low. so low they brushed the roof as we passed. At some point, we all noticed the air inside the car felt heavier, like it was thicker somehow. The windows weren't down, but the pressure in the cabin changed. You could feel it in your chest. It was around 3 in the morning when the car started making this soft clicking sound. It sped up and slowed down with the tires. Marcus pulled over onto the shoulder to check it out. The second we stepped outside, the stillness hit us. No insects, no wind. Just a faint creak of the engine cooling and our own breathing. I turned and looked back down the road. Those headlights were still there, but this time they were closer. Close enough to see their shape. Or, I should say, close enough to see there wasn't one. There was no vehicle. Just 2 lights hanging above the road, about the right distance apart. But no outline, no grill, no metal, nothing. Lena grabbed my arm and said, "We're getting back in the car." We didn't argue. Marcus didn't even check the tires. He just floored it. We drove faster than we probably should have. And for the first few minutes, I kept checking the mirror. Then, without warning, the lights vanished. No fade, no turn, just gone. It should have been a relief. But instead, it made the silence in the car feel worse, heavier. We didn't talk, didn't play music, just kept driving. That's when the signs got even stranger. They stopped listing towns. Just numbers or directions that didn't mean anything. Route 0 or Exit 13A with no context. One sign just said return. None of it made sense. Lena pulled her hoodie over her head, tucked herself into the seat, and held the little silver cross she always wore. She whispered something, but I couldn't make it out. The trees kept closing in. Branches scraped the side of the car. The road narrowed until it felt more like a path than a highway. Everything felt like it was pressing in, like the world was shrinking around us. Then Lena yelled. She pointed straight ahead, and there it was, a real sign. A clean green interstate marker for I-75, pointing toward Lexington, clear as day. Marcus didn't hesitate. He took the ramp like it was our last chance. The road widened again. The lines came back. The trees stepped away. And just like that, the GPS came back online. No errors, no glitches. Just a calm little blue arrow on a normal road. The map made sense. We were back. Nobody said a word for the next 2 hours. We made it home just after sunrise. Didn't even say goodbye. Just each went inside and slept for the rest of the day. It wasn't until the next afternoon that Marcus texted me about the gas. He'd filled the tank before we left the concert. We should have had more than enough to get home. But by the time we got back, the tank was almost empty. The GPS said we traveled about 20 miles during that stretch, the part with the wrong signs and the vanishing lights. But somehow we burned through over half a tank of gas. When we tried retracing the route later, nothing lined up. None of the towns. No gravel path. No gas station on that bend in the road. It's like we were never there. Since then, I've been on a lot of road trips. Different states, different routes. But if the path goes anywhere near the back roads in Kentucky after dark, I don't go. I was 19 when it happened. 2 friends and I were driving down through Kentucky, heading toward my cousin's place just outside of Clarksville, Tennessee. It was one of those road trips we threw together at the last minute. We didn't plan much, just filled the car with gas, packed up a cooler with cheap snacks, and tossed in a few duffel bags with whatever clothes we thought we might need. We figured we'd crash with family, hang out for a few days, and come back before Monday. Nothing complicated. I was driving an old blue sedan that rattled if you hit 55 too fast. It had a busted AAC and one speaker that only worked if you smacked the door twice. But it got us where we needed to go, and that was good enough. We pulled out of Cincinnati early that morning, still rubbing sleep from our eyes and clutching gas station coffee like it was medicine. The highway was quiet at first, just long empty stretches with fields on either side, and the occasional billboard reminding us to buy fireworks or stop for fried pies. We made dumb jokes, played music too loud, tried to guess what kind of roadkill we were seeing every few miles. Everything about the day felt easy, comfortable even. By late afternoon, we were somewhere outside of Louisville. Traffic was getting thicker, and I saw a smaller highway on the map that looked like a cleaner route cutting diagonally south, away from the congested interstate. Faster, less annoying. I figured, why not? It was supposed to shave at least 30 minutes off the trip. We peeled off the main road and followed the turn. For a while, it was perfect. Open farmland stretched out in every direction. There were patches of thick trees here and there, and the road itself dipped and rose gently like it was made to lull you into autopilot. No billboards. No signs for fast food or rest stops. Just pavement and sky. About an hour in, though, I noticed how few other cars we were seeing. Like, none. The longer we went, the more I realized we hadn't passed another vehicle in at least 20 minutes. It was subtle at first. No one said anything. We all just kind of sat there, looking out the windows, waiting for the next town to show up. Eventually, we hit a gas station. A single building set up with a faded canopy and 2 rusty pumps. The kind of place where the vending machine still had prices taped on with masking tape. We figured we might as well fill up, grab drinks, maybe use the bathroom if it wasn't terrifying. Inside, it was dead quiet. There was one guy behind the counter, middle-aged, wearing a blank name tag and a hat with no logo. He didn't look up when I came in, didn't speak when I set down a bottle of soda and a pack of gum. Just rang it up, handed me my change, and stared past me like I wasn't there. No music. No sound at all, really, except for the dull buzz of a fridge behind him. I muttered a thanks and backed out. Outside, Derek was walking the edge of the lot like he needed to stretch his legs or shake something off. Haley stayed in the car, scrolling through her phone, but she looked up long enough to mouth, "Creepy, right?" I gave the car a quick look over. Tires were fine. No leaks. Everything looked normal. We got back on the road. Less than 5 minutes later, I started hearing it. A scraping sound, metallic, thin, coming from under the car. It wasn't loud, more like something brushing or dragging. It started soft, then faded out entirely after a minute or two. I assumed maybe we picked up a loose branch or drove over something stupid in the gas station lot. Didn't think too hard about it. We were still laughing about something dumb Derek had said when Haley leaned forward suddenly. "Hey," she said, "didn't we miss that turn?" I checked the GPS. Still said we were on the right highway. But the road signs weren't matching anymore. Instead of names we recognized, we were getting exits for towns we'd never heard of. Ash Hollow, Raven Ridge, Banners Crossing. They didn't even sound real. The road looked wrong too. The terrain had changed, but in a way that felt almost sneaky. What had been flat land was suddenly turning into rolling hills. Sharp dips, winding curves. We weren't climbing mountains or anything, but it was enough to make us stop and ask, "Wait, are we still in Kentucky?" It didn't feel like Kentucky. Not this part. I pulled over to check our phones. That's when things went from weird to actually unsettling. My phone said we were just outside of Lexington. Derek's phone had us near Bowling Green. Haley showed we were close to Ashland. That's 3 completely different parts of the state. Nowhere near each other. We all refreshed our apps, closed and reopened them, even toggled airplane mode. Same thing every time. 3 phones, 3 locations. No one had any idea which one, if any, was right. We stood by the car, staring at our screens, when a car appeared behind us. Slow at first, then creeping closer. It was a white sedan, old enough to be from the 90s, maybe earlier. Dent marks on both sides, like someone had scraped a mailbox or a concrete barrier and never bothered to buff it out. The car didn't pass us fast, it rolled by like it was sizing us up. Inside, there was just one man. Gray hair, pale skin, both hands on the wheel. He didn't look at us, not even a glance. Just drove past like we were trees on the side of the road. The second he passed, the scraping sound came back. Same as before, but louder, more constant. I checked under the car again. Nothing was loose. Nothing was dragging. But the sound wouldn't quit. We got back in and kept moving. Only now, the road felt stuck. Like it didn't want to let us out. The scenery started repeating. We passed a crooked wooden fence on a slight curve 3 times. Same split tree. Same cracked asphalt patch. It didn't feel like we were going in circles. Our speed and direction stayed the same, but the world outside the windows was just looping. No towns, no signs, no houses, nothing. After about an hour, the sun started dipping low, and the light took on this weird, stretched quality like it was dragging its heels behind the clouds. Haley finally said, "We need to turn around." And I didn't argue. I flipped a U-turn at the next clearing and started back the way we'd come. About 20 minutes later, we passed that same gas station again. Same crooked sign, same dented pump, same dusty glass, and somehow the same guy behind the counter, still standing in the exact same spot like he hadn't moved an inch since we left. None of us spoke. We just kept driving. Right as we passed it, the white sedan appeared again, this time ahead of us. It pulled onto the road from a narrow path like it had been waiting for us. Same scratches, same empty license plate. It stayed a fixed distance in front of us. If I slowed down, it slowed. If I sped up, it did too. Always just close enough to see, but never close enough to catch. And again, no signs of life. No taillights, no movement, no head turning. Just that gray-haired man staring forward, as if he knew the road better than we ever would. The scraping sound grew unbearable. It rattled the dashboard, buzzed through the floor. Haley covered her ears and started whispering, "It's not real, it's not real, it's not real," like that was going to make it stop. Derek reached forward and gripped the headrest of my seat so tight his knuckles went pale. I felt like if I pulled over, that car would stop too. And then, something would happen, something we weren't ready for. Up ahead, a small, cracked exit ramp appeared out of nowhere. No lights, no signs, no explanation. It looked half abandoned, the kind of road you'd only take if you were completely lost or completely out of options. We were both. I took it. The white sedan didn't follow. It kept going. No turn signal, no change in speed. It just disappeared into the trees. We followed the exit downhill for a while, bouncing over rough pavement, until the road straightened out and merged with another highway. This time, the signs looked right. The GPS corrected itself. Everything on the map lined up again. We were back where we should have been all along. We didn't speak for the rest of the drive. Not a word. We hit Tennessee a few hours later, pulled up to my cousin's place, and unloaded in total silence. That was the last time we talked about it. No one brought it up again.